let me try one last-ditch effort to go back to this individual who expressed some interest in what I do and offer to work for that person for free. Another potential plus for the PAREA program.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
All right, beautiful people, welcome to the podcast. Dustin Harris hanging out in the podcast chair. Right there's the podcast treadmill. It's been sitting there for a few days. I'll be honest with you, I hurt myself, so I couldn't stand or walk for a while. I could sit. So finally, after almost a year of having that on the floor, making me walk, I leaned it up against the wall, and honestly, I've kind of gotten used to sitting, and I'm not moving it back anytime soon. So there you go. That's my excuse. I'm no longer injured. Your thoughts and prayers are not needed right now. But I'm not putting the treadmill back for now. I'll get to the diet tomorrow. I want to welcome you to the podcast. My name is Dustin Harris, and you're listening to the Appraiser Coach Podcast. And today we're going to talk PAREA again. I talked about it a few weeks ago. And we're going to talk about it from a little different perspective today. First, I want to pause and always remind you that we're sponsored by some great companies out there, folks. Some people ask me why I accept sponsors, and the bottom line is, folks, because I believe in them. They're companies that work well for me. Sure, there's money involved. I mean, why hide that? That's what sponsorship's all about, right? But I'm never going to take on a sponsor that I don't believe in and utilize. Two sponsors today are no exception to that rule. Of course, E&O through OREP. OREP is my E&O of choice. It should be yours as well. OREP.org is where you go. OREP, that's OREP.org. And of course, Alamode. I use Alamode. It's right there on my screen, folks. I'm looking at it right now, working on a couple of appraisal reports on Alamode. Alamode.com or 800 Alamode. Okay, folks, we're going to talk PAREA again today. Some people are calling it PAREA. I get it, folks. I understand there's pros and cons to this. First, I want to establish something. I've been accused many times in the past of being a shill for the AMCs. I have no clue what that means, where that comes from. I think I'm pretty open about my feelings on things. And yeah, do I work for AMCs? Yes. Are they the majority of what I do anymore? No. The majority of what I do is not AMC work. But I do work for a few AMCs, and I'm very careful about how and who I work for. I'll give you an example, not to get off too far in the weeds, but yesterday I spoke to an AMC and going through the setup process and got through to the end. We got to the fees discussion, and when she shared with me what my normal fee was and asked me if I wanted to meet that, I said, no, thank you. I'll stay where I'm at, which was much higher, almost twice as much, honestly, than what she was indicating. And I'm okay with that, folks. Here's the thing. If I get an order from that company and it's at my fee and my turn time and my way of doing things, great. If not, I'm not so desperate that I need to drop my fees to meet some arcane number that an AMC needs to make their bottom line work. I mean, that's the bottom line. Have I, over the years, taught about AMCs and taught that they're the low-hanging fruit in the sense that they're probably the easiest thing to get? Sure. Does that make me a shill for the AMC? I guess if you're one that says absolutely no AMC work, no way, no how, I won't do that. I'd rather sell my soul to the devil. Fine. I guess I'm a shill for the AMCs because I see that they are a beneficial part of what we do as an appraiser. And as a coach, I'm going to continue to teach my clients how to get AMC work if that's what they desire. Okay. Sorry for the in the weeds, off the subject, off the path. Let's get back. Let's scoot back. Get back on path. We're talking today about PAREA. Okay, PAREA is practical applications of real estate appraisers. What does that mean? Well, a couple years ago, they made it clear. The powers that be said, maybe there should be a different path to become an appraiser. A lot of appraisers had a real issue with that. I didn't necessarily have an issue with that because I can see pros and cons in most things. I feel like I'm a pretty practical guy, can look at things pretty circumspectly. I'm a cynic at heart, but I'm certainly open to being wrong. And so I was open-minded about this as well. Let's start with the reasons why PAREA was put forth. And what I want to share with you today is potentially a couple of benefits to existing appraisers. And I want to make that clear, not potential appraisers. I think anybody can see the potential upside to potential appraisers, right? But the complaint has been over the years that this is going to hurt current appraisers, right? The good old boys network that's protecting their own and that won't let new blood come in, okay? And how can this possibly be a good thing for them? Well, I want to share with you a couple of reasons, in my opinion, why it could be a good thing for current appraisers. But let's first start with wannabe appraisers, people who want to become appraisers but have not been able to do so. The original reasons for PAREA, my understanding is basically twofold, right? The first thing that we heard, and I don't know that I believe this completely, but it definitely was put forth as a thing, okay? The thing that they put forth was that there is not enough appraisers. There are not enough appraisers, okay? And because there are not enough appraisers, we need a different path for appraisers to get there. The second reason is related to, and probably just a further description of the first reason, right? The first reason being there's not enough appraisers. The second reason is one of the reasons they gave for not having enough appraisers is because it's too difficult to become an appraiser. And specifically, it's too hard to find a mentor. Folks, I don't necessarily disagree with that reasoning because I deal with appraisers across the country. And let's be honest with you, the people that I deal with are a little higher class appraiser, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you are in that class of appraisers that I would say higher class, right? Most appraisers spend their time head down, working hard to become to kick out more work and pretty much hate their life, right? And never understand the principles of good business. I became a coach many years ago because I was able to find a path for myself to success that I wanted to pass on to others. A way of doing appraisals that's different than the norm. And I teach my clients how to be profitable, how to be successful, how to love what they do, how to go back to why they became an appraiser in the first place. Okay. Now, that being said, that is a select few as far as the demographic and the audience, right, that I'm going after as a coach. It's the same audience that is here on this podcast. If you're a person who is willing to listen to this podcast, it's most likely because you care at least a little bit about success, that you're more than just becoming the best appraiser possible, though that's a very important aspect to what we do. But it's also becoming the best CEO or business owner. It's about finding the way to success so that you can continue to do what you love, which I hope is appraisal. That is a very small pool of people, okay? So with that pool of people, with these individuals that are concerned about, worried about, at least thinking about success, right? I have dealt with this higher class of people, and even in that realm, I find that there's a challenge. There's a disconnect between those who want to become an appraiser and those who are willing to bring on appraisers. And the reason I bring up my demographic, my clientele as the coach, is because at least most of them are willing to look at the law of delegation. At least most of them are willing to say, you know what, there is a potential and a possibility here for my hiring a potential trainee, which will in some way allow me success, or at least allow me to elevate my success as an appraiser. Okay. Most appraisers are not in that realm. And thus, I kind of see their point when they say that PAREA is a pariah. PAREA is just not for us. Now, does PAREA cause concern? Of course. I think it would be foolish to not point out that there's some concerns out there, some cons, if you will, on the pros and cons list. There's some cons when it comes to practical applications of real estate appraisers. Okay. And one of them is, let's just be honest, and I'm not of this mindset. Let me make it very clear. I'm not of this mindset. I'm simply repeating what I have heard others say. The thing that I'm not of the mindset of, but I hear often, is that we need to protect our job. If we allow just anybody to come into this industry, then somehow that's going to cut into our bottom line. Well, honestly, folks, that to me is foolish. It just sounds foolish to me. It sounds fear-based. It sounds, well, we won't go down that road. It doesn't sound forward-thinking. It certainly doesn't sound like a producer. It sounds more like a consumer and somebody who lives in a fear-based society. Okay. So that being said, I'm putting that aside for just a little bit. Okay. I want to talk about two potential positives, two current appraisers, not wannabe appraisers. Again, I think it's pretty obvious what the pros are to wannabe appraisers. If you're one that can't find a mentor, you've tried and you just not had any luck finding somebody who's willing to train you, well, PAREA is an option for you. But is it possible that there's a couple of upsides to current appraisers as well? I think there are, and I want to share those with you when we get back from the break. First, I want to pause and remind you that we're sponsored by a la mode. A la mode being the leader in the appraisal industry when it comes to report writing software. Folks, there are some cool things with a la mode. Let me give you an example. I was just on a coaching call, if you will, with a la mode yesterday. And this individual was setting up QuickSource for me. Folks, if you've not looked at QuickSource, you need to. I mean, talk about a time saver when it comes to inputting comps. In just a few minutes, a la mode was able to map my MLS to a la mode. So now I can choose my comps, and then I can have those entered into my grid in my format. I can customize it in my way. That's just one of the great things about a la mode. Check them out by going to alamode.com, or you can find them at 800 a la mode. We are sponsored, of course, by OREP Insurance. OREP is my E&O of choice. Why? Well, folks, they've been there when I need them, number one. That's what insurance is for, right? To help you sleep better at night, that when that complaint comes, that you have some support. But folks, it's so much more than that. And there's so many E&O companies out there, but you really need to just do one thing for me. Go to the web, type in orep.org. That's orep.org, right? Click on the tab that says benefits, and you tell me if your E&O has any of those awesome benefits. I guarantee they don't. Check them out by going to orep.org. That's OREP.org. All right. Welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out once again in the podcast chair. We're talking about PAREA. I want to share with you just briefly a couple of possible upsides to PAREA. One of them I think is obvious. And first of all, before I get into the upsides, let me just say why I'm sharing this episode with you. The honest truth is I hear a lot of negative on the social media. Even a little bit amongst the people that I coach, though not so much. They're just a little higher class, if you ask me, which you didn't ask me, but I'm going to share it anyway. I work with some awesome appraisers, just forward-thinking, business-minded appraisers who are here not just to make a living, but to build an empire, but to truly make a difference in the world. And it's awesome. But even amongst them, they're sometimes concerned about PAREA, right? But a couple of things that I want to bring up, right, is PAREA may be a good thing for current appraisers in a couple of realms. First of all, let's just talk a little bit about PAREA for a second. First of all, PAREA happened. Okay, it was approved, if you will, on the high end. Okay, each of the states have to approve it individually, and by the end of the year, it's estimated that all 50 states will have accepted. Most of them have at this point, a huge majority. Okay. PAREA is all about mostly online learning, but there is some mentorship as well. Okay. And it's a very expensive thing to set up. McKissick backed out. They were originally one of the two companies that were chosen to be able to implement PAREA. They found McKissick, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically claimed that the cost to set up was not worth the benefit to them, so they backed off. AI, Appraisal Institute, remains as being the sole provider of education for the PAREA program. Okay. It roughly runs you, depending on if you're a member or not, runs you about $4,000. Okay, $4,000 in a couple of years of your life. Okay, nobody is through it, so it's impossible to find to decide whether it's been successful or not. There are people lined up that are taking it currently, but nobody's actually graduated from the program, if you will. So we don't know for sure how beneficial it is. Okay. But a couple of things have happened over the last little bit that I think are worth pointing out. One of them I think is obvious. Number one, the first reason why PAREA may be good for the current profession is that I think as a supplement to their training, and I want to stress that, I don't know that PAREA alone will be the end all be all, but as a supplement to their training, I will say that PAREA, at least what I've seen of it, is pretty good. It offers information that I mean, I'll just be honest. I'll be the sacrificial lamb here for a second. And I love my father. By the way, as I record this, it is the right around within a couple of weeks of the 1 year anniversary of my father taking his flight from the Earth into a different sphere. Hopefully, I'll see him again sometime in my eternal life. But for now, he has left the Earth, and that's a weird way to say that, isn't it? He died about a year ago. It sucked, and it sucked for a year, right? I love my dad, and he was my mentor, but he did the best he could, and my training was not the best, to be honest with you. And I think that my story is not original. I don't think that I am alone in saying that my training was not the best. I'm not saying that PAREA fixes that problem, but I tell you this, the stuff that I've seen in PAREA, number one, a benefit to the profession in general, I think it might be a little bit of an elevated education above what many of us got. Now, some of you might say, well, Dustin, I had the best mentor in the whole world. Well, great. Good for you. I don't think that's the norm. So reason number one that PAREA may be good for current appraisers is I wonder if it elevates our profession just a little bit. I wonder. I don't know. Again, nobody's graduated from it. There's no test subjects that we can point to, but I will say the chances are pretty good that it's maybe a little better education than I got. Okay. Number two, I want before I tell you what number two is, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. And yes, the story is related. I'm not getting off in the weeds again. I was on a coaching call this morning and speaking to one of my mastermind students, and he told a story. And by the way, I do have permission from him to share this story. I'm not going to share his name with you, but I do have permission from him to share this story. And I may be getting the details a little bit wrong, but I'm pretty close. Okay. Basically, it went like this. He either approached a trainee or a trainee approached him. I don't remember who initiated the conversation, but basically, they were looking at a partnership. Okay. So where my mastermind client would train a new trainee. And basically, the mastermind client said to the trainee, I don't really have the time right now to train you. So the answer is no, I'm not going to do it. Okay. So the potential trainee went out and, according to my client, looked at 15 different other potential mentors, was turned away by 15 other potential mentors. Okay. Every single one of them said, no, I don't want to take on a trainee right now. Next thing you know, this potential trainee comes back to my client after my client had already turned them down and said, listen, I really want to become an appraiser. I've looked at PAREA, okay? I've looked at 15 other mentors. I'm willing to work for free. Now, I've been challenged by this before. I've told you stories in the past on this microphone about individuals that I know who either have trained people who paid them to be trained, or they paid their mentor to be trained themselves. I know that to be a fact. I've worked with several people where that's the case, and I've been challenged on that, saying, come on, really, Dustin? You would charge someone to be a trainee? No way, no how does that work. And I'm sorry, folks, it does. This story, to me, points out the second potential benefit to current clients. Folks, when somebody looks at what it takes to become an appraiser through PAREA, and then they come back to a potential mentor and offer to work for free, that tells you something. And no, I don't think it tells you they're lazy. I think that they've looked at the process. They've looked at the cost, $4,000. They've looked at the time commitment that it's going to take to go through it. And they said, you know what? Let me try one last ditch effort to go back to this individual who expressed some interest in what I do and offer to work for that person for free. Another potential plus for the PAREA program. Folks, thank you for joining me today. I do appreciate it. I love that you're out there. I love that we're continuing to grow. We're working on our 1,000th episode. 1,000, can you believe that? 1,000 episodes of the Appraiser Coach podcast. I would love, as we get closer to that 1,000th episode, I would love to hear from you on what you recommend we do for that 1,000th episode. I want to do something fun. I want to do something original. I want to do something unusual. I would love to hear from you. Please let me know what your thoughts are on what the 1,000th episode of the Appraiser Coach podcast should be. Thank you for joining me today. Go out there and create some value.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.